you ever wish there was another Halloween in March? Because we sure do. And if you do too, here's a question for you. Yinz Dahn to listen. I'm Greg, aka Cookbook Thor, the god of thunder and Hulupki, and I'm joined as always by.
I'm Rob, Jibs Warrior, or AKA happy to have gotten to go to what we're going to talk about today, because I had a blast and there's a lot to discuss. So not only was it entertaining, but it'll make for a good podcast. And what we're going to talk about on today's episode is a fantastic convention that occurs every year in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, called Horror Realm Con. This one's just really fun. It adds a lot of the elements from a major convention, but with a strict horror genre theme. Panels, photo ops, celebrity guests, and of course, a lot of vendors and other friendly faces that we're familiar with from the area. It's always had a strong appreciation for the indie horror genre as well, with movie screenings going on all weekend. Um, Greg has been a mainstay at this con for many, many years. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Greg, to give us kind of a tour around Horror Realm and as a convention veteran.
Well, yeah, I suppose I am a convention veteran when you think about it. I think my first horror realm was back around 2009, I believe, which was one of the first installments, was not the very first, from what I understand. And it's always been a top-notch show, super well run and fun to attend. Lots of good stuff going on. And I remember that first show. I met the late great Tony Todd from Candyman. And on a side note, shame on the Oscars for omitting him from their in memoriam this year. That's a pretty big omission in my humble opinion. And between that and Demi Moore getting robbed for Best Actress, I really don't have much faith in the Academy and how they treat genre films, particularly horror. But I digress. That's a common sentiment with horror fans, I think
Mm-hmm.
you will find. And uh, we don't need the mainstream appreciation. We know it's good stuff.
For
So,
sure.
um, Horror Rome is a great place to get together with like-minded folks for that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
subsequent shows have allowed me to meet folks with pretty big names in the genre, like Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy Thompson herself, and C.J. Graham, who was Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th Part 6, um, which is my favorite of the entire series. And I would say the GOAT himself of special makeup effects, Tom Savini, also a local hero.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the GOAT of Scream Queens, Linnea Quigley, another great favorite of mine. And more recently, 2 years ago at Horror Realm, we got to meet Art the Clown himself, Terrifier star David Howard Thornton.
Mm-hmm. In
And
makeup, in makeup for
indeed,
photo ops. So,
yes, just as Terrifier 2 was really blowing up, we got to see him, and now he's filling up much bigger venues.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's just a few that I think of off the top of my head. I feel like Rob, you've made it to a few that I haven't, and I've made it to a few that you haven't. But I'm fairly consistent. If not every time, then I try to go at least every other year, and it's always a loaded card, And they even have wrestling guests on occasion, and like this time they had Nick Nemeth, aka Dolph Ziggler, who came down from Cleveland, I believe, and he seemed to be having a great time, as everyone else was. And they sometimes bring in other guests that the clientele appreciates that maybe aren't directly horror, but definitely have the love from fans of the genre. And the one that came to mind for me was Carol Spinney, aka the Muppeteer, who brought us Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. And I wasn't the only dyed in the wool horror fan in absolute awe that day of the guy who gave us Big Bird and Oscar. And that's the picture of me with him. The look on my face is pure awe. And and that's the which is part of the fun of going to cons is getting to meet these sort of people and get that fun experience in your life. And oh, did I mention the after party at Horror Realm? Because that's always a great time too. Um, Friday nights they've been doing a karaoke at the hotel bar known as Scarioke, and sometimes the guests even get involved with that. And sadly, I was too exhausted to join this time after a long week of business trips. It just wasn't in the cards, sadly. But I was glad I got to enjoy what I did
Tank ran
before
empty.
my time ran out, and I had to go home and recharge. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, for
and
sure.
yep. But like any convention, yeah, that's really the best part is the friends you see there, and it really did my heart good to catch up with so many people. I mean, I feel like I knew more people than I didn't know at this show, which is pretty awesome, especially considering how crowded it got to be for a Friday, which may not necessarily be the most busy day of the show, but this they seem to do excellent business, and I'm very happy for them. Happy for our friend Rich, who promotes the show, and yeah, it was another big success, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And my history is, doesn't go as far back. I think that my first horror realm was probably the last one before the pandemic, so 2019. Um, is I believe that they skipped the March 2020 edition.
Yeah,
So I think that that was the one that it might have been the first one after the pandemic where they had kind of the part seven, Jason part, Friday the 13th part seven. So Kane Hodder, Lar Park Lincoln. That one was the one that I was really pumped for because that's my favorite horror movie, and
hmm
story to come later on that as well. Um, but that's where I procured. Well, not I didn't procure it there, but that's the first time I broke out the poster that came with the Friday the 13th Deluxe Edition collection that was the Scream Factory put out the box set of Blu-rays that has the awesome slipcase for the movies, but it came with a I don't know if you'd call it canvas. It's definitely a different material that apparently sucks up markers. We've had that conversation
Yep.
about Tom Savini on the podcast, but that was the first one where I started to kind of gather signatures, of anyone who was in the franchise who comes to the area. So the good thing for me as a Friday the 13th fan is there's always a way, there's always someone to get a signature on that poster at Horror Realm. So this year was no different as well. So the I've been to every subsequent show. Like Greg said that I've had an opportunity just because there's always someone. And Rich puts on a great show. They're definitely worth checking out every time they come through. There's also, I guess you'd call it, maybe, I mean, I know it's got a different name. I think it's the horror flea market, but it's almost kind of like a horror realm, uh, you know,
It's a horror
point.
realm light. It's
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
a
it's basically
horror
the
realm
halfway
light.
point show without guests. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So you get the vendor market and things like that. That's very horror themed. But like it's horror realm point five. So you get the horror realm 10 or 12 or whatever, and then you get 12.5, all depending on the editions of the show. And that's I think that's closer to fall, if I'm not mistaken, right? That's like a
Yep.
August September time frame, I think,
Mhm.
on that one. So but yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic time, and they always I always like these. I hesitate to call it a smaller convention because that's not exactly what it is. I mean, yeah, it's not your New York Comic Con or C2E2 or anything like that where you would consider it this massive show, but it's not small either. It's not a fire hall or anything
Yeah.
like that. This is a
They get some big guests like
yeah,
some well known guests and sought after guests. I'd call it medium size, and
yeah.
it's a good size because it's not so overwhelmingly massive that you have to wait all day in line for things, and it's yeah, not so little that you can see everything in an hour.
Yeah,
Which not that there's anything wrong with either of those, but yeah, this is yeah, it's a happy medium.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this, not only from being able to see it all, do it all, but it's the guest experiences. The celebrity guests, they they take their time. Like some of these cons you go to, especially large scale ones where you're meeting folks, like I just use and it's not him. I'm not taking shots at him or even the convention, but Robert Englund came through the Pittsburgh area, and it was insane. I mean, there were obviously very popular, long lines, so you didn't have the opportunity to do more than say hello, maybe shake a hand. That you're in and out. In this convention space, at this show, and I'll tell a story here in a little bit about how it seems like you can't get away from these folks who you're paying to get an autograph from. You can't break away. That's how
Mm-hmm.
much they want to interact. So it's definitely an excellent event experience, especially if you are a fan of the horror genre, both mainstream and independent. So I mean, this year, or this iteration of the show, saw, at least from my perspective, a bunch. I was able to take my family with me. My wife and son came along, and they shopped while I moved from place to place to place because it's set up in multiple different spots in the venue. And some of the rooms were guest meeting rooms were kind of themed. So in this iteration, you had a kind of a Killer Clowns from Outer Space reunion. You had a Terrifier 2 and 3 um, opportunity, and then you obviously had some stuff sprinkled in here and there that really was on theme, off theme, so a little bit of everything. So as we kind of roll through the 2025 version, I think we'll get into some of the folks that we got a chance to speak with, have things signed and things like that. So really, getting right into it, Greg, who did you have a chance to meet at this year's Horror Realm, and how did it go?
Well, first off, when I got there, my first order of business was to meet Tom Morga. He is the only man to play Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, and Leatherface. He was Jason and the imposter Jason Roy in Friday the 13th, Part 5. So he was top of my list to meet. And he also played Leatherface in the bridge scene in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, which is another great favorite of mine. And he also was Michael Myers in some scenes of Halloween 4. That he was split between him and another stuntman, I believe, for whatever reason, which these things are not uncommon with horror movies. But yeah, he was super cool to meet, and as most horror actors are, and he flattered me greatly by when we stood up for a picture. He said, "Boy, Greg, you're big enough to play Jason yourself." I said, "Well, I did bring my Roy cosplay. I'll be putting it on a little later. I'll show it to you." And when I did show it to him, and he thought it was fantastic, and I was quite humbled by that, because I painted that mask myself, and yeah, sourced the rest of the things. Which it's a fairly basic suit. It's a blue coveralls and a machete and the blue chevrons on the mask as opposed to red on the proper Jason one. But that was fun to stomp around in that for a little while.
Sans
Uh,
balaclava, though, right?
yeah, I forgot my balaclava. Yeah, I tried to get all prepared ahead of time and had everything loaded in my car, but of course, I got ahead of myself and did not remember the balaclava that goes between my skin and the mask itself. So my skin was against the latex hood that I had on, and yeah, it's not the best feeling in the world, and it gets a little gross after a while, but I managed. And I mean, it wasn't super hot in there. It's a decent time temperature wise to be wearing a costume like that. That's a little that can get a little warm, as opposed to in the summer when I'd be yanking that thing off after 5 minutes if I didn't have a balaclava on, because it's bad enough with one on when you wear that stuff in the summer, which doesn't stop me. But
Hmm.
yeah, that went extremely well, and yeah, Tom couldn't be any friendlier. Yeah, I looked it up, and I believe he's 83 years old, and you would not know it.
You would
You think
not
he's
know it.
yeah, I would have guessed 60. You know, he's yeah, extremely extremely spry. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. Most folks when they lie about their age, they lie downwards. But I didn't know better, I'd say he was lying upwards.
yeah, yeah. So before you move on, he was also one of the people I rushed to get first person. So same situation, just a little a little bit later, maybe half an hour later after you had met him. Uh, yeah, we went right over. So this was the only person that me and my entire family were together when we got to the table because he didn't have a line when I got there. So unrolling the canvas poster, we'll call it the canvas poster, for lack of a better description of the material. He had signed it, and again, the poster, if you've never seen it, we'll share it on our socials, so you can go have a look if you're following, if you're playing at home. Um, it's a very cool piece of art that has a lot of different versions of Jason on it. So he, located himself right in the middle and signed right on it. And, that was, kind of first guess. That's kind of what I expected to be the extent of it. Maybe a pleasantry, hello, thanks, shake a hand type of thing. Um, but he was ready and willing to have a conversation. So my wife just went right up to him and had a question. She watches horror movies usually in the fall time frame. It's kind of the flavor of the time of year. But her question was legit, straight from the heart. She basically wanted to know, playing these horror characters, specifically Jason Voorhees, was there, do you have any sense of fear? It's a scary movie. When you're filming the movie, are you looking at it from the perspective of, hey, this is creepy? And he basically proceeded to tell her and my son and me, basically why he didn't. He basically said that, while filming, he's so focused on portraying the character that he's not really thinking about how he's portraying a scary character. He's just playing the character. So um, the explanation he gave came with interaction because he basically stood up and, like Greg said, you wouldn't know this man's 83 years old. He stood up, he asked my wife to move over to the side, and he, held her by the shoulder and, said, hey, when I'm going to hit you with a machete, and he mimed hitting her with a machete. He's focusing on the action, making it look natural, and not being able to, take in much more than that. So after that experience, we did exchange the pleasantries, the entire family, and we moved along. And my wife's reaction was, I just got mime hacked by a machete from someone who actually played Jason Voorhees. And I said, yes, you did. So, that was a really cool experience. And again, that's just the kind of pulse you can have from this convention, because you get the opportunity to take that little bit of extra time. Now, I can't speak to Saturday, and Greg, I don't think you can either. I assume it was busier. There was probably a bit more sense of rush, but probably not much. I wouldn't say it's much. They don't rush you through. So, hopefully those who got a chance to partake for the rest of the weekend had similar experiences. But it's funny that we both rushed right to Tom, right
Yep.
to it, to get that experience. And, we each had that individual, connection with someone who played a character that's, you know, so vast and so important. And if I'm not mistaken, he was Egon Spangler's stunt double in Ghostbusters too. So even if you're not a horror genre fan, you've probably caught his work.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep. Yeah, that's quite the resume he's got.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, Greg. So who's next?
Next up for me, it I didn't necessarily go in planning it, but I made a game time decision. You know what? Of course, I'm going to meet this guy again. He's awesome, and it just took a moment for me to remember how awesome he is, and that is Miguel Nunez Jr. He was also in Friday the 13th Part 5 as the character Demon, and who had a memorable line about enchiladas and met his end in one of the more embarrassing ways in the franchise. And um, he also was appeared in Return of the Living Dead, which is one of my very favorite films. He appeared in Street Fighter with Jean Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia, which is he played the character DJ, who was one of the in the video game world was one of the four new challengers added for Super Street Fighter 2. And he was also the star of the film Juwanna Mann in a basketball comedy in the early 2000s. And he had a recurring role on the BET drama The Family Business. So he's got quite a resume himself. And he is always the life of the party at any convention. He's so friendly and outgoing and joking around and fun with everybody. He's a blast to be around. And I first bumped into him actually in the men's room. He was going in, and I was going in at around the same time, and I was just going in to adjust um, my mask. I had to, I it helps to put it on in a mirror, so I was doing that, getting it on straight, looking at it, and just as I was finishing up, Miguel was heading out, and I said to him, "Yeah," I said to him, "I was really trying hard not to make an enchilada joke while you were in there." He laughed pretty hard and fist bumped me, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to go see him at his table. I'd be crazy not to, right?"
Yep.
And so I did. I got a picture with him and of me going out, basically going after him with my machete, and it was quite fun. He is a hoot to be around. I can't recommend meeting him enough. Um, so that was the second one off the list for me. Rob, would you like to?
Yeah, yeah. So now for me, it kind of gets blurry. I mean, I know who I met, I just don't know what order. So I'm just
Mhm.
gonna go in what memory serves. So the next person on my list to you know to meet at the show was Barbara Crampton. So if you're not familiar, she has a pretty extensive resume. She's been in a lot of different films. She was uh, Pulse Pounders was one, Puppet Master was another. There's just a lot on Lords of Salem. She was in that film as well. But the reason that I and really what I wanted to get accomplished was an autograph, and I got it on my the Reanimator DVD. So she was pretty much the main squeeze, I guess you could say, in the film The Reanimator. Megan Halsey in that film. With Bruce Abbott, Jeffrey Combs, obviously as the Herbert West character that really set that movie off for me. It was so I just really enjoy that movie.
Mhm.
It's kind of my wife's never seen it. We were having a conversation with Barbara Crampton after being in line because she was extremely personable. Every single person, you know, autograph, photo, whatever they were doing, when it was finished, there was no getting away from her. So I alluded to it earlier. Like she stopped everyone that I saw in line after signing their memorabilia, their poster, whatever it may have been, and basically said, "Well, do you have any questions or anything like that?" And you weren't getting away without an interaction. So for me, uh, that my wife and son had went through the vendor hall, but they had come back because she did have a little bit of a line. So they had come back when I got up to the front of the line, and they were standing there, and I was explaining how I had a special edition copy of the DVD that I had never opened. So I opened it specifically for this, and I told her that, and I said, hey, this is one of my top movies that I like to watch. I have the little Herbert West. They made the Toonie Terrors figure. I have that on my desk with the
Mhm.
severed head in the tray and him holding the needle and things like that. And I had told her, I said, this is great. I said, this, my wife and son, I said, they've never seen it. Obviously he's only 12. And she's like, well, it's not really that scary. And I said, yeah, I said, it's just a little gory more than anything. And my wife started shaking her head and she's like, okay, well, what's your favorite, horror movie to me? And, I had said it earlier, mine's, part seven, Friday the 13th. And she was like, oh, I don't, which one is that? Basically, which one is that? Is how the conversation went. And who's in that? And I said, well, that's the one with the telekinesis, and that's Lar Park Lincoln. And she's like, no, I'm not familiar with her. And I said that in that one, it's Kane is Jason. She's like, oh yeah, yeah, I know Kane. And then she can started to pull it up on her phone to see if there was anybody else that she knows. And uh, she started going through the list on IMDb right there. We're both looking at her phone. And she came across Terry Kaiser's name, and she's like,
I
"Oh yeah,
figured
yeah,
she knew
yeah,
him.
I know Terry." And apparently, the her agent, who was there with her, who was taking the photos and stuff like that, she said that, oh, he represents Terry as well, so we know Terry very well. And I said, oh yeah, cool. I don't know how we got onto this topic, talking about Reanimator, but again, there was no getting away from this situation, and not that you would want to, but that was the kind of experience that you can have at this convention, and I think it's fantastic, because you just, again, I keep saying it over and over again, but it bears repeating. It's so cool to have that experience as someone who goes to these other cons as well, and you don't get it. Sometimes it's just a machine where you go in, you come out, you go in, you come out. This one, you're not getting away from the person you were there to meet. So that was another and it's not the last story I'll have either. So keep on listening.
Mhm.
So Greg, who's next on your hit list?
Well, next up for me was actually just a couple of Q&A sessions where I wasn't necessarily interacting too much, but I wanted to hear what they had to say. So, first one I went to was probably I would say the most iconic horror genre face that they had booked at this show was Michael Berryman from The Hills Have Eyes, which he's the face on the poster, and he's really one of the more recognizable faces in 1970s and 80s horror movies, having been in so many fun movies and music videos. And he's an incredibly kind man, and I really enjoyed listening to his stories. I've met him before, so I was very happy to hear what he had to say again. And the next Q&A I went to was Cassie DePaiva and Sarah Berry from Evil Dead 2.
Mm-hmm.
And they reminisced about their memories of making that movie and memories of working with uh, Ted Raimi and Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and Rob Tappert and that whole crew. And Evil Dead 2 is one of my very favorites, so I was glad to hear what they had to say. And yeah, some of the stories were uh, a little on of the troubles of production were a little on the icky side, but it was still worth a listen. And I was glad to be able to hear what they had to say. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's another fun thing about these conventions is that there's something going on at all hours typically, and you can go in and if a given celebrity isn't signing autographs, then they may be in the panel room, taking questions from fans, and I was glad I got to experience those as well.
Yeah, yeah, I did not. I did not get a chance to. I don't even think I went to that side of the venue until the very end. I think when we saw you and we were departing, that was the first time I was in that hallway to go over to there. I didn't even get a chance to really step foot in the panel room, which, is disappointing. But there was a lot. It was a lot
Mm-hmm.
for me to get through. So the next thing that I did was I made my way into the other part of the venue, which was what I guess you would call individual rooms, where they started to kind of theme them. And I stepped into the room that had the Terrifier cast. So I was able to get a few folks, and I have the Trick or Treat Studios art figure, the pretty good size. And, like we talked about earlier, a previous incarnation of Horror Realm had, both Damien Leone and David Howard Thornton at the show. So they were the first autographs on this figure I got, which, still in the box, right on the clear plastic that covers art. I have an autograph from David, which is he's got a little drawing of arts, a clown face in his signature in white paint marker. It looks really, really nice. And then Damien signed underneath it. And it's funny because the way he writes, and I had a conversation with one of the folks that I met at this iteration about the way he writes, because he wrote "Stay Terrified," but the E and the D in the end of "Terrified" looks a little rushed, so it looks like a C and an O. So it looks like it says "Stay Terrifico." So it's
I thought that was just my imagination. Okay, because I did
so
notice that.
yeah, it says stay, so I will always look at it that it says "Stay Terrifico," but it is "Stay Terrified." So that's cool. It's a one of a kind piece. But after talking to really Lauren Lavera, who played Sienna Shaw, who you know for those of you who have not seen, or even though I'm going to basically speak to those who haven't seen the franchise. Um, Terrifier, it was, the original Terrifier was just kind of like your typical splatterfest. There was limited story, limited storyline. Um, in Terrifier 2, Damien kind of fleshed out a story. And then continued it into Terrifier 3. So in Terrifier 2, you had a couple of main characters. Not that you didn't in 1, but there was a lot more backstory to it. So I'm not doing it justice for those who want to see it. I'm not spoiling anything for you. But Lauren was the main, the main baby face, if we're using
Yep.
wrestling terms. Um, and she was in that room, and so was Elliot Fulham, who played Jonathan, her brother, her younger brother. And he was the first person that I interacted with in that room. Younger gentleman, I don't know if he's even 20. Might be, maybe if he's 20, he's just 20. It's very
Yep.
young. Could be older. I don't know for sure, but younger gentleman. Extremely friendly. Just excited to talk to everybody who's there. Really thankful. Got my picture taken with him and an autograph on the actual flap of the figure. Again, follow us on socials. You'll get to see all these wonderful items that we have. We'll make sure to post up something as well. But he was extremely just kind. His voice is kind of high pitched voice. It really works as a horror character, especially in the victim space. But it was really cool to meet him. And then right beside him was the lady who played the Clown Cafe TV host from Terrifier 2, who was Leah Voice, I think is how you say her last name. But she's also a nurse in the end of credit scene. I think it was an end of credit scene with Chris Jericho, right? Right, Greg? Yeah.
Yeah, that was Jericho's scene.
Yep. Yeah. So she was the nurse in that scene as well. in that scene in Terrifier 2. So got her to sign it. She did a photo op on Saturday in the Clown Cafe makeup. I think I saw some photos of that. Obviously,
She
we were
did. She
there on
did.
Friday, so that was cool. And then I had to reconvene because at the same time that I was getting those autographs, Lauren was doing her professional photo op. Um, so she wasn't sitting at the table when I was there, but I was able to come back a little later on and get her. And she's the one who said that Damien's handwriting is a little sloppy when he hurries. So Stay Terrifico could have been a lot worse from what I understand. So that was kind of funny as well. But so the art figure that I have is slowly but surely filling up with folks, and I might have to get um, you know some more on that one as things progress along. I kind of regret maybe not getting Dan Roebuck and maybe even Chris Jericho when he came to the other convention. It would be cool to have that on there as well, but I digress. So that was my Terrifier room experience. So Greg, next one on yours.
Well, on that Terrifier note, you may get a chance at Daniel Roebuck this summer. I believe he's coming back to Monster Bash. So before I get
Or
into too
awesome,
deep, but I think you may have your chance there.
perfect.
And yeah, my next was actually ended up being the last one I met, but it was one I was maybe looking forward to the most. And that was Diana Prince, aka Darcy the Mail Girl of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. And she's probably the most popular horror hostess currently active, I would say, certainly nationwide. And she's kind of the straw that stirs the drink on The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs over on Shutter, which is one of my favorite programs to watch, and that's starting back up their new season very soon as well. And talking to her, basically, if you're a horror fan, if you're a wrestling fan, anything of that sort, you're instant friends. She's a huge ambassador for the genre and super active on social media and super cool to chat with. And I even slipped her a Yinz Dahn business card. So if you're listening, hi, Darcy.
Awesome, awesome. I
Uh,
think she did what she you said she commented on the artwork, so that always hopefully pushes people to look at our professional organization we have going on here.
Indeed, yes. She thought we did a fine job on those business cards.
All I did was arrange them. Our buddy Greg, he did the artwork, so we won't take credit, but we will. Does that make sense? We won't take the credit, but we will in certain aspects. So
Yep.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So, the last stop, not the last stop, but the last major stop for me was the next room, which was, I guess you would have classified it as the Killer Clowns from Outer Space room, because really that's what it was. It was kind of everybody hanging out that they brought in, and they brought in, quite a collection of folks. It started out with, I have a pretty decent Killer Clowns collection and this or display, and in my man cave, I guess you could say. I have the animatronic Shorty that was at Spirit Halloween. I have a lot of the Trick or Treat Studios figures, and then usually Spirit every Halloween has a new prop replica. The popcorn gun, the acid pie, Shorty's bat, things like that. So I have a pretty good decoration corner, but this was an opportunity to get some folks to autograph stuff. The question was what to get autographed. So I took a couple of items. And we'll jump into what we got autographed in a minute specifically, but I had to start out, and I really had to get two different things autographed because they weren't big. So I started with the folks who represented clowns in the movie. So Herod Blank and Mike Martinez were two of the folks who were in clown get up in the movie. So Herod, he was Rudy, and Mike was Slim, which is funny. I thought it was the other way around because Herod's a very tall individual. I would say, he probably had a couple inches on you, Greg. I think he was like 6'6", 6'7". So I was like, oh,
Oh wow.
this has got to be Slim. But Mike, who's probably closer to my height, he was slim. And then I started thinking about it. Well, Slim had to be skinny, so I think as the character got taller, it was probably more animatronic and things like that at the top rather than an actual person with broad shoulders like Herod. So it made sense, when you think about it. But that's not how it approached me at first. I was like, this doesn't make any sense, tall, short type of situation. But I got their autographs and they each inscribed. So Howard did enjoy the popcorn, and then Mike did popcorn wishes and candy corn scream, or yeah, and candy cotton candy screams. So on my memorabilia, so that was really cool. And then I had to pivot at that point. So my son, he enjoys Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It's one of the first quote unquote horror movies he's seen because it was this summer they aired it on Svengoolie. So we watched it there. So you get a little bit of the, you know, uh, edited version. Not that there's much editing needed in that film. It's kind of off the wall funny anyway. Um,
Mhm.
Except for Shorty's scene with the biker. That's
Yep.
probably the one. But I didn't have enough space on that item. So I had to go out to the truck to get another item. And my son wasn't happy about it. Not that he was, freaking out, but he's like, wait, we gotta get everybody else. I said, we'll be back. There wasn't anybody else in the room, so everybody got a good chuckle because he didn't want to leave, and we didn't have anything else to do except pivot. And so I went out and got the other item and came back in for the two non-clown guests that they had. Suzanne Snyder and Grant Kramer. Those were the other two non-clown guests that they have, and those are pretty big because Grant was Mike and Suzanne was Debbie, so those were outside of Officer Dave, those were your main characters. And you had the brothers, you had the Rich and Paul, you had those two guys as well, but you know Debbie and Mike were that was it. I mean, it followed them from beginning to the end of the film. So, those were big folks to meet. And, for those of you not familiar, Suzanne was also in two episodes of Seinfeld. She was the girl Nazi in the film where, or in the episode where Jerry and George hop in the limo that wasn't theirs. Ended up almost going to a neo-Nazi rally, which was a hilarious episode. And then she made another appearance as a different character a few years later in the episode with Poppy not washing his hands, and then the pie wouldn't eat the pie, and Jerry wouldn't eat the pizza. So I told her a joke that went right over her head. So I guess I'll give away what I had autographed by them. I had the acid pie prop that Spirit did, which is kind of like a foam prop. And I was concerned about it, but Grant actually said he's done it before, so it was no big deal. But when I got to Suzanne, I said I figured the pie was a good prop because you wouldn't eat the piece of pie. And she just kind of chuckled and didn't even put two and two together. And I'm like, well, I said it. I was happy. She didn't catch it, but I don't think she was expecting a Seinfeld reference that early in the show. But that was me. I had to throw that at her, but not the pie. That's funny.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
sure you weren't the only one who did that.
yeah,
Always.
exactly. So so that was the last room, which that was one of the main big reasons why I went down was our affinity for killer clowns. So it was cool to do that. And then the last person that I met was one of the other reasons that I had gone over, and it was Allison Court, voice actress, and then I think it was the I didn't watch it. It was after my time as a kid. The Great Big Comfy Couch, or the Comfy Couch show. She was on that show, but she also voiced Lydia Dietz on the Beetlejuice animated series. So that's really why I wanted to. She was on my hit list, was because of that. So I had a Funko Pop of Lydia Dietz, and she signed it. Um, personalized that little drawing and things like that. So she put Deadly Vu on there, and then her autograph, and then Lydia underneath it. So really cool. So that's like one of those things, like you talked about, Big Bird, Oscar the Grouch. You don't necessarily expect a voice actor, because she was also Jubilee in the X-Men uh, animated series as well. So,
Hmm.
some pretty diverse celebrity guests. Like you said, the Dolph Ziggler was there this year as well, and I think Saturday saw Christy Hemme and Jacqueline, from
Yep.
our friends at ATD Promotions, brought those two ladies in on Saturday, so that was cool as well. But a fine gathering of individuals with a great show put on by Rich and his crew at Horror Realm. So really, really good stuff. So Greg, the next question I have is, we kind of went through and they were part of the stories, but what did you get signed, and what photos did you have taken?
Well, with I had a photo of Tom Morgan and myself. It was before I suited up in costume, and I got an 8x10 of him as Roy in Friday the 13th Part 5, which was pretty cool. And I got just a photo with Miguel Nunez, which I already have his autograph, so wasn't too, I didn't feel the need to buy another 8x10. So I was still happy to get that. And with Darcy, I got a photo with her, and I bought a signed copy of the Up All Night with Rhonda Shear comic book that she appears in, which
Hmm.
Rhonda Shear was the host of USA Up All Night uh, in the 90s, which I spent many nights staying up all night to watch her. And I was so bashful I couldn't even look directly at the TV because I just got lost in those big eyes of hers. And that would probably happen again. That happens again every time I see her on TV, like when she appeared on The Last Drive-In not too long ago.
Hmm.
But I digress. Yes, so Rhonda had actually signed this comic as well, and Darcy added her signature to it. And if I ever get to meet Joe Bob, which I intend to, then he will add his signature to it as well. And as a fun little bonus, a little teaser for the next issue of that comic book is that our friend Laura of Lenora's Midnight Rental will be appearing in that book, and she even has a cameo on the last page of the one I got. So that was kind of cool.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, cool. That's really cool. So, for me, it was a it was a couple trips to the vehicle. So I got quite a bit, just because of all the people that were on the list to meet. So, as I alluded to earlier, I have my poster, the big poster from the collection. That's obviously something that I just brought along. The Terrifier Trick or Treat um, figure, which got autographed, but the Reanimator DVD, that was autographed by Barbara Crampton. And then the clowns are on one of those movie poster Funko Pop like cases, acrylic cases with a pop in there that has it's not a big one, it's one of the smaller ones. So two clowns on that one, and then like I said, the acid pie prop for Suzanne and Grant on that one, and then that Funko Pop for Lydia. But that was the autograph stuff in the vendor room. Um, the one thing that was really cool, my wife found them, but they were, I guess the best way to describe them is, back in the 80s, early 90s, they had, I guess they were flat cardboard decorations that you could hang on the windows or anything like that. And they're very classic looking. The one is a witch you just see her in the house. It's the house silhouette, and there's the black cat. There was a jack-o'-lantern with a top hat. So these are, I think they've reproduced them for sale now. They actually make them on wood and cardboard, but we still have the original ones that we use every year on the china cabinet in the kitchen. She found miniaturized versions of those that were like Christmas ornaments on strings. So, and they're the exact same thing. These are handmade or made by the artisan in the vendor room. So, it was really cool that we now have those in like a bunch of different versions, and this is just another version of that. That was one of those situations where they were running around the vendor room, and they basically flagged me down, and she just said, "I need money," and then ran over and grabbed them. So I was glad that she was able to find something as well, and there was a lot of stuff there. I didn't really purchase anything off the vendors. I probably could have, but like you and the karaoke, by the time I got done doing what I had went to do, I was whooped. So I didn't even really get a chance to really delve in. The only thing that I really looked at was probably the DVD selection off of a couple of vendors. So that kind of is a good segue into the next question, Greg. Is there anything you saw there that you didn't take home?
There was quite a bit. I mean, I would have loved to have gotten the Killer Clowns cast autographs, but I was trying to discipline myself. I mean, which was not an easy choice to make because I absolutely love that movie. I mean, that's a five-star Stone Cold classic as far as I'm concerned. Um, but yeah, something kind of had to give. And there were some really cool movies on VHS, but again, I'm trying not to go totally hog wild on those because I have more than I have room for already, and I don't know that I necessarily have them displayed in the most optimal way for the gems of my collection. But it was still cool to see them, and there were some fun T-shirts and uh, monster masks and horror figures and such that I would have happily given a home to. Like there was I think there was a Friday the 13th Part 5 shirt with Roy's mask on it, which might have been cool to have. But perhaps another day, maybe I'll come back and get that at the fall show.
Yeah.
And as I said, I couldn't stay late enough for karaoke. But these are the sacrifices one must make as a semi-responsible adult. So
Yes.
onward
Yes.
and upward, I suppose. But
Yep. For sure.
it was. I can't say I have any major regrets, but it was a satisfying show overall.
For sure. The only things that I really saw, like I said, I did do a little perusing in the DVD bins, and um, if you listen to our Monster Bash episode, there was a vendor there who sells a lot of the Santos classic movies, whether they're horror genre or more. The DVD vendor at Horror Realm had some Santos DVDs and Blu-rays that I was looking at, and I always get intrigued by those. I just find the whole premise fantastically entertaining, sometimes ridiculous, but that goes hand in hand. They're not bad movies; they're just misunderstood.
Yep.
So I dug through those a little bit and didn't take any of those home. But there was I guess you'd call it. It's kind of like a 4x6 picture, but they're crocheted with characters and sayings on them. So there was a Godzilla one that I have now decided is going to be my outro wish to you folks as we end the show. So no spoilers. You have to listen to the end to know what it says. But I probably should have bought it, but I didn't. I just had to memorize what it said for podcasting purposes. So that's really the only thing that I kind of let slip away. So, like I said, we brought home a lot of stuff too. I think we've kind of talked about what we picked up and things like that. But I think this is the part of the show where we just give a round of applause, kudos to the Horror Realm crew for another great iteration of the show. I had a fantastic time, and I was only there Friday night. Really, 5 o'clock to I think 10 p.m. was the hours on Friday night. I was able to get there. They had guests there. There's other cons that I've gone to that if you want to go Friday, you're going to get hit and miss of the folks who are going to be there. And obviously there was some folks who were there certain days. I just lucked out on everybody that I wanted to meet was there Friday evening, and we were able to have a good time, see good friends. Greg, I even think that you picked up some stuff that you had no intention of finding at Horror Realm because you got a special delivery at the show, right?
I did. Yeah, that was from our good friend Chris at VHS Crypt, who is also a Horror Realm regular, and I met up with him, and he delivered me some WWF LJN wrestling figures from the '80s, which I've had a great time repainting lately. And he got in a collection, and some of them were in less than perfect shape, which suits me just fine because I like to refurbish them and give them new, different ring attire and do custom jobs and various things. And my creativity has been kind of focused on that lately, and that's really been my happy place in the evenings and the weekends has been working on those lately.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so,
and
so
if I'm not mistaken, Chris, obviously a guest on the show in the past with Rick from Monsters in the Toy Box and Toy Hio fame, but I believe that Chris has some humble beginnings with Horror Realm, because I think he told a story of that's kind of one of the first places he got into doing what he does that sent him down that path. Including maybe his first time meeting Rick. And Greg, I think your first time meeting Rick was at Horror Realm as well. Is that
yep,
accurate?
yep. So that's longtime friendships forged at this show.
Yep,
Yep,
yep.
yeah. Which again is the best part of any convention is the friends you meet there.
For sure. All right. Well, any closing words? Any kudos, props, or otherwise plugs, Greg, from your side?
Well, I would echo your words and give a big tip of the hat to Rich and his crew and everybody who made it happen. And we can't wait for the next one.
Check out that flea market coming in the latter half of the year, and if you're listening to this in a time machine, usually the March time frame, that late winter on the edge of spring is usually the time frame you'll start to see information on Horror Realm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So definitely check it out. All right. Well, guys, thanks for listening. And please head over to all your podcast apps and subscribe so you don't miss an occasional episode about this sort of stuff. Give us a follow on all your social medias, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, that good stuff. You can go check out our other ventures by clicking on the links that we have over there in our podcast social media. If you have any interest in being a guest or submitting a question, you can always email us at yinsdown@gmail.com. So it's been an entertaining show, and Horror Realm 2025 is in the books. So from Greg and I, may Godzilla destroy your home last. Have a good evening, everyone.